Hello and welcome to this edition of The Perspective, where we discuss global and international issues. Today we discuss Kenyan politics. On 9th August 2022, Kenyans voted Dr. Samuel William Ruto as president alongside his deputy Rigathi Gachagua. Over the past few weeks, political tensions have surged following a series of statements made by the deputy president, which have sparked widespread debate, including an impeachment motion that is underway in the Kenyan parliament. As the political landscape becomes increasingly polarized, we are faced with the pressing questions about the future of Kenya's stability, democracy, and unity. Joining us to unpack these unfolding events is Wycliffe Nyamasege, a journalist and colleague with deep insights into Kenya's politics. We will be discussing the implications of the deputy president's remarks, the subsequent political tensions, and the potential pathways towards this conflict resolution. Wycliffe, thanks for joining me, and thanks for making time to come to The Perspective.
Thank you, Sam, for having me. The pleasure is all mine.
Yes, Wycliffe, you have a good insight into Kenyan politics. First of all, how did you get here?
Thank you, Sam. I will start by saying that the events of June, you remember the protests that we had in Kenya, had everything to do with whatever we are seeing today in Kenya. I'll start by giving a context of the whole thing, how it began. And you can't say that without really talking about how the two, President Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua, assumed office. The two leaders were elected in a joint ticket in the polls held on August 9th, 2022. They had defeated long-standing opposition leader Raila Odinga, who was also gunning for the big seat. You know, Gachagua hails from the Mount Kenya region, where the former president Uhuru Kenyatta comes from. So during that time, as political alignments were occurring, President Ruto was part of the Jubilee administration that formed the previous administration. Right? So there was intense politics in Kenya at the time, as Ruto wanted to be president, and the president decided not to support him openly. That I don't want to support my deputy. I'm supporting Honorable Raila Odinga. So there was a point of departure between Uhuru and his deputy, Ruto. Yeah. So that then left Ruto to, see how to get votes from Uhuru's backyard, which is the Mount Kenya region. And that is where Gachagua comes in. So he had to rely on the mountain to get support. So he picked Rigathi Gachagua as his deputy from the region, and Gachagua managed to, bring in a lot of votes from the mountain. And he commands a huge share. Because of that, he commands a huge share of the government right now. And after they were elected, and they were in office they have been in office for about two years. Then things started going south in June when the Gen Z protests erupted.
It had always been a bed of roses until that time.
Exactly. It was nice. It was both Ruto and Gachagua used to attend church services in several parts of the country every Sunday, thanking Kenyans for the support that they accorded them during that time. So after now, when Kenyans, about the finance bill is the issue that actually I can relate to all this that is happening right now. So in June, there was that finance bill that usually takes effect in July of,
Every financial year.
every financial year. There are those kind of debates where, the government attempts to find ways of, increasing its income. So June was the time when they introduced, the government of President Ruto introduced a bill in parliament, the finance bill to raise additional taxes. And Gachagua was a bit uncomfortable with some of the things that were inside there. And he started saying that the ground is the people, were uncomfortable with some of the ways that the government...
So he supported the demonstrations
Not
in a way?
Not directly. He tried, through church services on Sunday. Politics in Kenya is a bit intense. And these politicians often use the pulpits to pass their points. So during churches, he could be heard urging the government to listen to the voices of the people who have been taxed and overburdened. So there was that voice. Then Kenyans, especially the youth now, took to the streets. So it is perceived that through his talk and, him saying that Kenyans are uncomfortable with the tax measures that they wanted to put in place, they believe that they started accusing him that he was behind the protests.
I think at that moment they were not looking eye to eye with his boss.
That is when now they started going, different ways, slowly by slowly. So it started from there. So Gachagua would later issue a statement in Mombasa saying that the National Intelligence Service had failed the government.
His own government?
Yes, the government in which he serves. So he said, Nudi Haji, the director of the former director of public prosecutions, who is now the director general of NIS, National Intelligence Service in Kenya, had failed the country. Can you imagine a deputy president saying that the head of NIS had failed the country by failing to advise the government that there was this looming protest in Kenya? Some people started getting uncomfortable, including the president and his allies from the Rift Valley region. Ruto hails from the Rift Valley region. So some people started getting uncomfortable. Like they saw like Gachagua was a threat. He was dividing the same government in which he serves.
For me, it seems if you say he blamed the intelligence services
Yes.
for not advising on the looming Gen Z protests.
Yes.
And yet he was also speaking for them.
Yes.
That means he was playing double standards.
Exactly. And you can understand why some people started feeling uncomfortable. So that was the genesis of everything that you are seeing today that has boiled over to kind of an impeachment.
Let's
motion.
talk about this impeachment.
Yeah.
What's the process of impeaching a deputy president in Kenya?
The process of impeaching a deputy president is enshrined in Article 144 and 145 of the Kenyan Constitution. The president can either be impeached through if he is incapacitated or if he commits, gross misconduct and all that. So under the current grounds, they are basing it on gross misconduct. And they have brought in additional charges that we're going to talk about, but the process starts from there. So a member of parliament sponsors a motion which they table in parliament. It was tabled last week. You saw that. Then the Speaker of the National Assembly approves the motion. It is set for debate this Tuesday. From there, once it receives, you saw them talking about 291 signatures.
Yes.
So it must be supported.
That's 2/3 of the parliament?
Kind of. It must, receive a majority. The Kenyan parliament has 349 MPs. So for a motion to be approved to be tabled in parliament, the sponsor of the motion must move and lobby, get signatures from at least 173 of MPs. Then once the motion is tabled in Parliament, there is debate that is going to ensue, like it was tabled last week. There is that process now that the Speaker of the National Assembly called for, what we call public participation. It is a process that, Parliament goes to the ground to speak to the electorate, to ask them about their views about the general thing about, the impeachment. Do you think it is the right thing to do? Or so those who support and those who don't support. So the debate that we are expecting on Tuesday is about, now the MPs debating fully on the grounds of impeachment, which are 11. We are going to talk about them. Then once that is done, the Speaker of the National Assembly must submit the resolutions if they are supported by at least 2/3 of the National Assembly, of the members of the National Assembly. It will be passed to the Senate. The Senate is where the whole thing is going to play out, the Senate. So once the Speaker of the National Assembly informs the Speaker of the Senate of the resolutions of the members of the National Assembly to impeach, the Deputy President, the Speaker of the Senate will have 7 days within receiving the motion to either form a committee that will look at the charges that have been brought before against Gachagua. Then the committee of 11 people will have 10 days to investigate the grounds of impeachment, and if they are substantiated, then the Senate, which contains about 45 elected senators and others nominated, will have to take a vote. If they approve any of the grounds of impeachment, if there are 11, if they dismiss like 10, then approve just one, it means he goes home. But if the special committee decides that the grounds for impeachment have not been substantiated, then the impeachment dies a natural death. So that is the process.
So in your view, what are the key messages in the Deputy President's statements that have brought him all this trouble? And how do you think those key messages have been interpreted on the political spectrum?
Yes. It is actually very interesting since some of the grounds of impeachment date way back to even when these guys were buddies, like when they were traversing all the churches and all the counties of Kenya, to thank Kenyans for electing the government. Gachagua used to say, there's one thing he used to say, and all these MPs who are pushing for the impeachment used to attend those meetings, and some Kenyans are quite surprised that it's a ground for an impeachment right now, but then it was not. That's why I usually say that impeachment is more of a political process than even a legal process. So the first remark is about the government being a company. So Gachagua said that the government is more like a company where those who elected the government, that is the Kenya Kwanza government led by the president and his deputy, hold the largest share
of the company. Wow.
Yeah, so that means they get, those regions that elected the president get the most government appointments, even the projects and everything. That is how it was interpreted.
Wasn't that probably dividing the Kenyans on a thin lines or something?
Exactly. So that is the ground for impeachment, where they are saying that he was, a deputy president is supposed to be a unifying factor. But right now, what he did was dividing the nation along tribal lines, because Kenyan politics mainly, is mainly tribal. And kind of we can say which communities supported who and who. So when you say that certain communities are the only people that are going, to occupy certain positions in government, clearly that is a problem. So that is one of the remarks or the comments that have brought him trouble. Then there's another one where the deputy president usually says he's a truthful man. And indeed, he's a truthful man, where he is able to, to say things as he sees them. It's not like way back before the Kenyan constitution was, amended and all those things, a vice president or a deputy president couldn't say these things that Gachagua says and goes unpunished, or back then it used to be when a deputy president or a vice president falls out with his boss, you are fired. But right now, the way the 2010 constitution is very progressive. That means a president can't fire his deputy. So Gachagua has been more outspoken about people-centered issues, that if he feels the government is promised A and is not delivering it, so he says it as he sees it. And he's saying that that is one of his downfall. Yeah.
Okay. There is where I heard him mention about betrayal.
Yes.
He said his boss had actually betrayed him. What exactly did he mean by betrayal?
Betrayal that he's talking about is what I started with earlier, how this government was formed and the deal between President Ruto and his deputy. The president, when he fell out with President Uhuru during their second term, he was humiliated and he was subjected to very embarrassing things that used to happen then, and he used to complain a lot about all these issues, that he was being undermined by junior staff, cabinet secretaries who used to even abuse him a lot in public gatherings. Some of them used to make very mean remarks during TV interviews, and Uhuru literally was not calling the house to order. So he promised that my deputy can't go through the same. I won't allow my deputy to go through the same thing, the same humiliation that I've gone through. So by saying betrayal is, Gachagua right now is under attack by the president's men, people who are very close to the president.
And the president is quiet about it.
And the president is quiet about it. So he feels like, or a section of Kenyans believe that, if you are not saying anything about these things,
then you are
actually supporting it. And it's a big, big debate that, has ensued over the last few weeks.
What do you think this whole saga is going to impact on governance?
It's going to shape how new political formations are going to be formed. If this impeachment succeeds, talking about betrayal and all those kind of things that, a certain community is saying, you promised us that you won't mistreat our son, you mistreated him. So how are they going to trust you again when you come asking for votes? So basically that is a huge problem that is developing out of this. And there's another thing that we also need to note, that there are a section of Kenyans who believe that this government has not delivered as it promised Kenyans. So they feel if the president is pushing for, or his people are pushing for this guy, the deputy president, to go home, they feel like it's a time like for a referendum. Is a referendum call, for the president to also go home, adding to the voices that the Gen Z were pushing for, that President Ruto should go home and his deputy. So basically that is it.
Well, in your own opinion, do you think the deputy president has crossed some ethical or constitutional lines?
It's very interesting. To some extent, yes, and to some extent, no. As I said, the constitution has emboldened the deputy president. So he's able to, if you look at it, on one side, he's trying to voice out things that ordinary Kenyans can't voice. He's trying to call the Kenya Kwanza administration to order, to just tell them that, guys, whatever we promised the ordinary citizens, that is not what we are doing. We promised A, we are not delivering. So he's technically, he's championing for the interest of Kenyans. But on the other hand, when you look at it, when he's being accused, for example, of as a ground for impeachment, where they're saying that he has been doing things like influencing how tenders are awarded, then that is crossing the line, really. If you say that there's a mosquito on a tender that they say the deputy president and his son told the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, KEMSA, to award to a certain person, that is not right.
That's unconstitutional. Yeah.
And also, I feel there are things that another thing in the coastal county, they are saying that a contractor was building, a road, a public road. Then the deputy president, these are allegations, diverted it to his, a private,
to his own beach.
Yes.
I think I read
something. So if he did those things as they are putting them, that is a problem.
That's gross misconduct.
That is a problem. And again, his face-off with President Ruto, kind of taking him head-on, telling him, you are betraying us, you're doing this. These are things that Kenyans need not to know. You can solve these things. The way you formed your coalition and, you were forming the government, some of these things were happening behind the scenes. So why now? Why do Kenyans need to know every little thing that is happening? Why can't you, put your house in order in a decent way?
And you don't put your dirty linen in public.
In public.
Yeah. That's a question to ponder.
Yes.
Well, we have seen Gachagua apologize. He has told President Ruto to forgive him in case, if at all he wronged him, or if at all he did anything to, that wasn't right. But still, Ruto is quiet. He's still silent.
Yeah.
What do you foresee as the relationship between the president and his deputy?
Judging from the previous, from Ruto and Uhuru, how they fell out, and how we used to be told that these guys are okay, yet you can clearly see that these guys are not okay. So it is until like 2021 that everything became clear or apparent that these guys had fallen out. So for these guys, clearly, as you can see, they are not working together. The deputy president was saying that he was removed from a WhatsApp group. What we don't know, clearly, that group, he was removed from that group. But maybe there was another group formed and he is not among. And he usually gets late to the president
to know that his program, so that he also does his alignment alongside his.
He was complaining of those things, and the president seems not to doing anything about it.
He's not bothered. He clearly seems not bothered.
Exactly. And there was this, when he wants to go to to conduct a certain project in a certain area, he's saying he plans his thing. Then the following morning he is told there is no helicopter to take you there. So you have to go by road or you have to cancel. Then there's another thing. There's a president's personal assistant that is said to also to be calling shots in the whole of this government. Like he can tell, the deputy president is saying that the personal assistant to the president was trying to give him instructions on what to do and what not to do. Warning some MPs not to attend the deputy president's events. And we are not seeing the president saying anything about all these allegations. So clearly there is a problem between the two. And maybe that's why the president sees that even if he forgave this guy, what next? Maybe these things are prone to arise again in the future. So maybe through an impeachment process that has been supported by all these number of MPs, he sees like it is the best way to deal with him once and for all. And remember, this is history repeating itself. Back then, when Ruto was at loggerheads with Uhuru, there was an attempt to impeach Ruto. But Ruto is a very tactical politician. he had the numbers of MPs. Like he had a large number of MPs on his side, either through sympathy or how, I don't know how to put it, but through that he was able to, to prevent all these things from happening. But the thing with Gachagua, maybe he has a few MPs from his home area, but a large portion of the MPs are behind the president.
So you think this fracture could actually lead to a broader political split?
Exactly. And it is going to shape how the next governments are going to be formed, the next political coalitions. Like I told you, Mount Kenya region has produced 3 out of 5 Kenya's presidents. So every region that has won Kenyan election, especially the presidency, has to get a support from the region for them to win. So if the Mount Kenya region says that you guys are sidelining us from whatever you promised us is not what you're doing, and opts to support another candidate from another region in the next election, that will be like a death blow to to President Ruto's ambition to get a second term.
When you mentioned about the Gen Z protests, we saw some little, let me call it little, but we saw force being applied. The police came in. At one point, even the army also proposed to come and support the police. I'm wondering, do you think if this whole saga goes untamed, it could evolve into some kind of violence?
Not necessarily. It really depends on how it's going to be handled. We have seen violence in the past, but how we are seeing even the protests that were organized recently is not people who go out to the streets to either kill someone else, kill their fellow citizen. It is how the police are handling the protesters. So it's not Kenyans who are fighting against each other. It is Kenyans and the government can call the police to order that if a certain group is expressing their reservations about whatever steps you need to take as a government, then protests are enshrined in the Constitution. You can allow them to voice them without necessarily having to bring the police, the bullets, threats with the military. Yeah. So I don't foresee a situation where whatever is happening right now can go into, can turn into, violence, because Kenyans are mature people right now. We have one of the most mature democracy. And, our constitution the Kenya constitution is very progressive, judging from, it has been amended severally, and, there have been contributions from experts. They have learned from mistakes that were committed in the past. So looking ahead, the people themselves are no longer so tribal. They are talking about issues like, taxes, development, roads, electricity. So those are the kind of issues that the government is supposed to be approaching. But I'm not seeing a situation where, Kenyans can turn against each other. Yeah.
Do you think there is, I'm sorry to ask you this question, but it seems as though it is really important. Do you think the civil society or the general community or Kenyans in general, do you think they have a role to play to de-escalate this tension?
Civil society, as its name suggests, they're supposed to,
or even religious leaders, maybe.
Exactly, yeah. So religious leaders and civil society, they play a huge role in any society to develop, to check on government excesses, police excesses, and all those kind of things. So I believe, and there have been calls from the clergy for the president and his deputy, to try and resolve their issues amicably. So given an opportunity, given a good environment, the president, if the president listens, he's the only person who can stop this. Even the impeachment. If the President Ruto today said that, MPs stop whatever is going on, that thing, the impeachment will die a natural death. Well, so clearly, the civil society and religious groups play a huge role, and they can help de-escalate whatever we are seeing today. And I've seen attempts to resolve this, even from some Kenyans. Some Kenyans have been going to the courts to say that, the DP is there's a political witch hunt around it. The courts can also help. Being a political process, I don't see much of the courts helping this situation, because if whoever is sponsoring this motion is determined to follow the due process, Gachagua can only survive an impeachment if whoever is sponsoring the motion errs through the process.
But the courts of law are the courts are the custodians of the law.
Yes.
So maybe they could also have something.
Yeah. They'll just check the process. If whoever is accused was given a fair hearing, we expect the deputy president to appear in the Senate, to
defend
himself. And it is also going to be a very interesting time, because there's a popular saying that they are saying right now in Kenya that kufa makanga, kufa dereva. He might decide to be Solomon. That's Solomon. No, is it? Who was that? Who was that who took the whole house down?
Who took what?
There's a figure. I think there's a figure in the Bible. Samson. Yeah. There's Samson of the biblical, when his enemies brought him to the temple there, and they wanted to kill him. They removed his eyes and all that. He asked God for strength to bring down the building. So that all this can go. So the DP appearing in the Senate could be a moment for him to air whatever dissatisfactions he may have, with either the president. So it's a very delicate thing.
So if you can't win them, you just spoil them.
Yeah, that's politics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, our time is fast spent, but I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
How do you think this political landscape in Kenya is being perceived regionally or internationally?
Yeah.
Like, how do you think it's a good image, for example, in the East African community, or do you think it's a blow to the unity of the bloc? How do you see other international actors, players, international countries looking at, because all eyes are now on Kenya?
Yeah. What
do you think is the perception from outside?
Yeah, as a progressive society, Kenya is very progressive in terms of, that's why you are seeing it's a process that is being taken to parliament. There are those processes, that are being followed. For the first thing, that is a positive thing. Like when you are dissatisfied with somebody, you give them a fair hearing. But on the other hand, if you look at it from the politics of betrayal, where you give promises and you don't deliver, then obviously our friends, the friends of Kenya, it doesn't give a very nice image of the government. But I don't see it as a negative thing in the region, because every society really has their way of handling issues. For example, Rwanda has its way of dealing with issues that are affecting the country. Kenya has its own. We are a people, and problems are a part of us. How we solve them is really what determines how other people view us. So all these processes are enshrined in the Constitution. If they are followed, really, I don't see it as a negative thing. I just see that I see it as a positive thing that shows that what progressive societies should do. When you are dissatisfied with somebody, say they are dissatisfied with how Gachagua is, handling his issues, So you give him a fair hearing. Then if he is removed, if the majority say that he is removed, man, that is democracy.
Wow, thank you so much, Wycliffe. What remains to be seen is how all this will end.
Yeah.
To our viewers, we shall keep tabs on what is happening in Nairobi, not only in Nairobi, everywhere. We are a show that dissects all issues in the world, be it health, be it sports, be it politics, be it climate, environment, name it. Feel free to also share with us your ideas on what you think we can talk about. The perspective is here for you, and we'll definitely keep you updated on all important national and international issues. From us, until then, it's goodbye. God bless you and God bless Africa.